define what patterns biodiversity, and there we learned a few reasons or logical reasons that we think are important. One was latitudinal gradient or the latitudes, which is, yes, latitudinal gradient. And we studied species area relationship, which was given by Alexander von Humboldt. So these two things are clear to both of you? Any doubt in this? What was this mathematical expression and this graph? And what do we mean
No.
by? Okay, great. And we also briefly, before towards the end of the last class, we discussed about um, organisms and in general how species are formed and what leads to their extinction. And we know that way more species have been lived on the planet in the past than there are current species. So we know that extinction is not a problem. uh, it is a problem, but extinction is not something unnatural. Extinction does happen. It has happened in the past. It has even happened before humans came to the planet. So much before, mammals evolved into humans, and the great apes evolved, there were species that used to live and get extinct, and new species will form, and so on. So why all of a sudden, like you must be hearing noise from around the globe about loss of biodiversity. We are losing our biodiversity. That is a problem. We should conserve this and that. So why is this noise? In the last couple of decades, or a few decades. So can you think of, if I say that extinction is speciation and extinction of species is a natural course of evolution. So what is the problem? Why are we so concerned about loss of biodiversity? Yes, Parker is back. So Parker, I was asking this question that we know that a lot more species have lived on the planet in past, right? Much before humans came, there were species that lived and then they got extinct, and we just only know about them because of the fossil evidences. They are no more on the planet. So, which means that new species forming and older species getting extinct is a natural course of evolution, right? Yes or no? Do you understand this point, Parker?
Yes.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, like in the last few decades, why there has been raising concerns over loss of biodiversities, extinction of species? What is the problem?
Deforestation.
Deforestation. So you mean to say the problem is uh, man-made interventions and
Yes.
human activities that is leading to increase of these events, right? So naturally, when it happens, when naturally a species get extinct, it does not happen so fast or in a bulk of amount uh, due to human activities, right? Though there have been great extinction events in the past, specifically, around 5 times on the Earth, where all of a sudden a large portion of all species got lost. But that was accidental, um, catastrophic events. Humans are actually, yes, Parker, go ahead.
And the dinosaurs, they also
Right,
getting like with
exactly.
natural
So
cause.
yes, right. So you're talking about that, the last extinction event, which is known as the KT extinction event, right? Which happened in the um, in the era where dinosaurs, reptiles were ruling the planet. So that was also it is believed, evidences suggest that it was a catastrophic climate change that led to their extinction. And also, it fits the theory of asteroid hitting the Earth. Also was a reason, not the only reason, but a reason for their extinction. True, but now, without any asteroid hitting or without any natural calamity, human activities or the activities like deforestation, all these events are leading to a global level species extinction, and that is happening in bulk. Okay, not just one species getting extinct here and there. So we are not concerned if one ant species or two ant species from a forest got extinct. We don't care. But what's happening now, and the evidences suggest, is that on a large scale, we are losing whole forests, like patches of forests are being lost, and organisms, birds are getting extinct. So that is a problem. Now we have something called the IUCN Red List. So this is where questions come from. So when we talk about loss of biodiversity, who keeps a record? So there is this organization called IUCN, and you know what does IUCN stands for? You must have heard. You know, you must have heard of IUPAC in chemistry, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So IUCN is International Union for Conservation of Nature and Conservation of Nature or Natural Resources. So basically, we are talking about not the resources here, but nature. So, which means it keeps a red list, and that red list is of the species that are either extinct or are about to face extinction, so which are vulnerable to extinction. And just in the last 500 years, you can see that organisms that have gone extinct are around more than almost around 800 species has got extinct that we know of, right? So the list is not like, because we don't know all the species on the planet yet, but what species we do know of, out of those 800 got extinct just in the last 500 years. Okay. And some of the recent extinctions, which means that the coming generation will never see these animals. They are all just myths and stories. They're pictures in the book. For example, if someone tells us that there was saber tooth, you all must have seen Kung Fu Panda, so or Ice Age, movies like that. So the organisms shown in these cartoon movies or these movies, basically for us they are myths. We have never seen a saber tooth, we have never seen a mammoth, we have never seen similarly like dodo or quagga. People have not seen, kids are not going to see quagga or thylacine or sea cow. Okay, because all those are extinct now. Just in the last 20 years, there have been 27 major species that got extinct. So these are some numbers that tells us that what is concern, what is problematic. Uh, they also keep a track of declining populations in the wild. Okay, and why it is important for populations to be stable in the wild, we studied about it in evolution, right? Unless and until you have a stable large population, you you will not have enough variation, enough sexual reproduction, and enough variation for natural selection to work. Correct? If you have a very small population, which is whether it is in the nature or whether you are conserving that population through a program, the problem with small population being conserved is lack of variation, right? Because then they have to inbreed. Whatever male is there has to breed with whatever female is available in that small pool. So variations will be less and less and less. And we know by evidences that when close relatives or close organisms interbreed, it leads to inbreeding depression. So in genetics, the recessive genes keeps on accumulating in generations. If there is even in humans, if there is the culture of consanguineous marriages, if it is kept intact for multiple generations. So we should also use the same concepts for conservation. So if you're conserving very very vulnerable species, but just by you know constant inbreeding, that population will not have enough variation, and anything goes bad with one organism, chances are highly likely that all the population might face, they might all die with the same kind of infection or same kind of disease. So that's the problem. So we need to keep a check on the population of that particular species, and this organization does that. And when they have analyzed their records for the data, they realized that it's not just we have lost around 800 species in the last 500 years. That is just the tip of the iceberg. We are moving towards a whole new era where thousands of species are facing the threat of extinction. Now, this is problem. And according to the list, more than 15,000 species are facing the threat of extinction. Now, this is why throughout the globe, all of a sudden, in last 2 decades, all the conservationists are on their heels and toes, shouting at the top of their head that we need to protect the biodiversity. Because imagine 15,000 species just getting extinct, and we humans are just ignorant about it. We are busy making our cities, putting up factories, polluting the environment, digging out more fuel and stuff like that. We can't do that. Like deforestation, so, like Parker used this point, wherever we find land where resources are there, and see, humans need resources to live. Organisms also live resources. Other animals also live resources to live, and forests are rich in resources. So, if I cut down forests, there must be lake around or there must be river around. It will be a great area to start a new village or a city also. But we have to understand that we should not do that. Now, no one is stopping us from doing that if we not listen or we don't have a moral boundaries. That's why organizations come together and try to convince the leaders, the global leaders, that see, just because we can do that, we should not do that. Why? Because we have to share the planet with other animals as well. It is as much their home as it is ours, right? Humans. So 15,500 species are facing a threat to extinction. And it's not just one type of organism, it includes everything. Around 12% of birds, 23% of mammals, 32% of amphibians, and around 31% of all gymnosperms. Now, amphibians, as we have already talked about, amphibians and gymnosperms, so amphibians in the animal kingdom and gymnosperms in the plant kingdom, are more vulnerable to extinctions because they need they have dependency on a particular type of environment. Like amphibians will also die if they don't get water, and if they will also die if they don't have proper terrestrial habitat, right? So they need dependency on both. You understand? So this is why loss of biodiversity is a problem, because what we already know, what we have already lost, is just the small fraction of what we might lose if we are not educated and aware about it. That makes sense, Aisha? Okay. So that's why you are studying this chapter, and this is a question you should ask yourself every time you read any chapter anywhere. The chapters are not just because we had nothing else to teach you. So in physics, chemistry, or biology, we thought, okay, let's add one more chapter which tells them about something. Okay, so everything that you study in your books should have some use or should have some relevance in your life. Okay, so ask yourself, why am I studying this? What should I learn from this chapter? Regardless of the fact that whether you will become a conservationist in life or not, you yourself might not be going and saving forests and trees and species, or working for IUCN or or what wildlife institutes. But even as a citizen, you can contribute if you understand what leads to, polluting the nature and stuffs like that. Now, in general, when there is loss of biodiversity in a region, how will you get to know it? So there must be some markers, right? So how do the scientists or these ecologists know that, oh, there is a biodiversity loss in this region? It's not like someone went every time. It's not possible that you have a data of 500-year-old data of the same place, and then you go and get the data of present, compare it, and you will know. There must be some criteria, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what happened? What are the um, what should effects or readouts when when there is loss of biodiversity? Imagine it like this. Imagine a wall. Okay, the wall is made up of bricks, and it's a strong wall, so it's defending something on the other side. Now, if I start taking one brick at a time, so when I will take out the first brick, it might not matter that much. It's just one brick, and it's okay. We have windows in the wall where there are many bricks missing. It might even, you will think that, oh, it's useful only. So some students ask me, why do we need mosquitoes? What if we get rid of mosquito as a species? All the mosquitoes. It shouldn't matter, right? We are just removing one thing. And I tell them that, yeah, because for humans, if there is no mosquito anywhere, we will be happier, right? Nothing to perturb you. Or for
Yes, sir.
some people, it's cockroaches. Why the hell we have cockroaches? Why don't, let cockroaches should go extinct, is what we feel. And you might think that it's okay, and it might also be okay because, it's one brick in the wall. But imagine one by one, we keep removing bricks randomly. We are not even removing it in a pattern that will end up making a window for us, but randomly a brick is coming out from the wall. So what will happen after a point? Do you think the wall will be serving its purpose? Will it be resistant, strong? Will it be saving us from anything? No, right?
Yes, sir.
We will be in a constant threat of the wall falling. Anytime it can just crumble and fall. So when there is loss of biodiversity in a particular ecosystem, the first thing that happens is primary productivity. We studied about it, right? In ecosystem, primary productivity.
Yes, sir. Plants.
Yes. And why is primary productivity important? Simple answer
Because
for us. Yeah. Go ahead, Parker.
because
Because
primary productivity is like the main level in a food chain.
right. But why is it important for us? Why should I care? If someone asks you, if you go and talk to your relative who doesn't know about ecosystem and biodiversity, and you say that, oh, the first problem with an species extinction is primary productivity reduces. So it's just a fancy term for him or her. So if your uncle and aunt asks, how does it matter to us? What do you think? It
Because
matters to, yeah, because, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
uh, the species who the biodiversity, the species which are lost, and the
Hmm.
species which depend on the species which are lost.
Hmm.
Now the species which are lost are not there. So the species which depend on those species, they're
Hmm.
not, they don't have food, so they'll also end up, dying.
But again, they can ask that, how does it matter to us? We are humans, right? Let them die. We will still
Because
survive, no? Is it just morality? Like, we should, it just matters to us because we will feel bad if one bird become extinct. We will feel bad if the primary productivity goes down. Or does it have real consequences for humans also? Because it's easier to explain things to human where you tell them that their necks are on the line. So if I go and tell, how do you think scientists convince the world leaders? They are politicians. So president of a country, why he should listen? He is more worried about votes, he or she, right? That whether next time also I'll win or not, my party will come to power or not. Why should they matter about conservation, primary productivity decreasing? But still it does. They gets convinced, they realize, they understand. So if you have to do the job, what you have to tell them that primary productivity is important. Why it is important? Just for others, or is it also important for humans? What do we eat? Do we only
Most
eat? Yeah, tell me, Parker.
we eat both leaves
We
and
plants and animals both, right?
yeah.
And whatever we eat, a major chunk of it, isn't it primary productivity itself? Don't you think? What we eat, the, in our food, the most of the components are productivity, whether primary or secondary. So if for a region, for an ecosystem, if primary productivity goes down, it's not just going to affect the animals, it's also going to affect us. We will lose our honey if honeybees go away. We will lose a lot of crops. Only we'll be left with crops which are wind pollinated, which is like your wheat and rice and something. But most of your fruits will go away. Most of our dairy products will go away, because if there is no primary productivity, we will not be able to raise cattle. And if we are not able to raise cattle, we'll not get any dairy product as well, right? So a lot of things that is important for our diet is also very, very vulnerable to change in productivity in the ecosystem. So that's how it matters. That's what you go and tell these leaders that, see, if this continues to happen, the next species that's going to go out is this. And if this goes out, economically, we are going to face a lot of loss. So profit and loss is the language that almost everyone understands. Scientists convert their data into profit loss scenario, and then they tell us that humans are going to bear a lot of loss because of this. If primary productivity of a jungle goes drastically down because we are just polluting it, we will be running out of wood, right? And sometimes we'd have no replacement for it. Do you understand, Aisha? Iram has joined in. Good evening, Iram. Do you understand, Parker and Aisha?
Yes, sir.
Good evening,
Cool.
sir.
Good evening. How are you, Iram?
Yeah, good, sir. I'm sorry to join late. I had some connection issues.
Yeah, no worries. So we are discussing why biodiversity loss is a problem, right? How does it matter to us, and why it should bother us at all? Okay. So first thing we understood, it leads to decline in primary production or plant production. Second thing is lowered resistance to environmental perturbations such as drought, not just drought, famine, increase in temperature. So as long as we have a lot of diversity, we know that any calamity can easily, be tackled, not at a organismal level, but at a population level. Again, the concept is that if you have too many trees, good number of trees in a patch of a land, then chances that that patch will become barren and desertify is very less. But if you lose plant species and if you just have one type of trees, like normally when cities are planned, they do not consult any botanist or ecologist. They just think that, okay, let's go do a green drive. And that has happened for almost all major cities. One thing is, we just keep planting one type of trees, thinking that, okay, all we have to do is plant trees, but that's not enough. We also have to understand what type of trees and why that tree is selected. Okay. So
Yes.
all these things matter a lot. Now people have started realizing that, because if you whenever you have perturbations, you need resistance, and resistance can only come through variation in the gene pool of that population in that region. So that also happens because of loss of biodiversity. And third is increased variability in certain ecosystem, um, where like season to season you will see a lot of difference, and that's happening. Sometimes the winters are very very cold at some places, and then next year the winters are not that cold, but the summers will be extremely hot. Sometimes the summer won't be that hot, but the winters will be extremely cold. Sometimes the monsoon will be just okay, perfect, but sometimes it will just start flooding cities and life is affected. And that's happening almost everywhere. I think that this summer was the first summer where Kuwait, which is one of the hottest cities on the planet on the summer, Kuwait witnessed hailstones. Hailstones fell in Kuwait. Are you aware of that? Anyone of you read that news? So it created a situation where roads were filled with these small hailstones, like ice is there literally on the roads. And then people are like, oh, for the first time, the city of Kuwait is seeing ice on the ground. That's not natural. That shouldn't happen normally, because this is just extreme fluctuations. Okay. And we know that South India starts to feel monsoon, and then there is a retreating monsoon. So monsoon is predominant in India, uh, down like Madhya Pradesh, Mumbai's, and South Indian regions. But this time there are lots and lots of storms, and the monsoon has just drowned people. So that's a problem. Sometimes monsoon is okay, sometimes it's too much. So all these are called increased variability in um, the cycles. And with these cycles of weather, it's not just weather, it's also a lot of disease come up. So if you have too much of monsoon, humans can, let's say humans can survive, because we live in our stone houses, we are protected, we have hospitals. What about other organisms? So if monsoon does not come and go at the right time, other animals will suffer. Birds will suffer because they don't know what to do, where to hide, they have no nests. Other mammals that depend on living in the burrows or depend on living on land, if their area is filled with water all the time, they are more prone to dying, right? And whenever there is a flood or famine or drought, animals die, then they start rotting. Then a lot of viruses and bacteria, you know, which are growing there, start affecting humans. Just zoonotic transfer. So the chances of disease spilling over also increases if there is too much of death of animals because of these fluctuations. So with these fluctuations also come disease cycle. Every rainy season, we are more prone to get infections, right? Skin infection, throat infection, nose infection, lung infection. Yes or no? It's because when seasons change, the breeding grounds for some pathogens, it becomes a breeding ground for some pathogens, and that's why. Also, water. So usage of water is affected, availability of water is affected, and that will again affect humans because we need water. So these three major things: decline in primary productivity, lowered resistance to any perturbation in the ecosystem, and increased variability to everything: productivity, water, disease, temperature, etc. So that's why biodiversity has to be maintained the best as we can. So this is an important part, cause of biodiversity loss. It comes as a, if it comes as a 3, 4, or 5 marker question. So just be ready, just know it, that there are some major reasons, and all of these reasons you must have heard or read of in your junior classes. So it's not very difficult. So if I ask why there is a loss of biodiversity, what are the human activities that cause it? One is habitat loss or habitat fragmentation. So habitat loss is where we just destroy their habitat. So these organisms have no other place to live. So habitat loss is directly correlated to organisms dying. For example, if you cut down a forest, then it's a problem, right? Where they should go. Apex predators um, like the big cats, bear, and all these organisms which are more resistant, then will start sharing the boundaries with human settlements. You must have heard of news that often comes that a cheetah, not a cheetah, a leopard or a tiger or a lion is seen roaming around or roaming in a village or a city or a town, right? They enter inside this town and created havoc. Yes or no? It often happens in India, in almost everywhere, because it's not like they are, we think when we hear these news, we think like they are invading our spaces. It's actually opposite. We are invading their spaces. We are making their habitats loose, because people who plan this, leaders, they have to be educated to understand that you cannot shorten a jungle thinking that, oh, this is too huge a forest, how it will matter if I take 2 or 3 kilometer of land. It does matter, because we have to understand that how do these organisms live. In a big jungle, you will not find too many apex predators because they are territorial. They have their territories, and these territories can be huge. For one tiger, it could be, as huge as more than 5 to 10 square kilometer of area is just the territory of that one tiger. And if you need 20 tigers, you can imagine how big the jungle should be. So you cannot make tigers live close to each other. You cannot go and say that, okay, because we also need space, so you also start living in smaller territories. There will be conflict, and then they will start coming to human spaces. And let me tell you, humans are easy prey. A tiger would love to hunt a human any given day, then it would love to hunt a gazelle, right? Because without our weapons, we don't have anything else, right? Especially the old and the kids, they are more vulnerable. So we, by invading their spaces, we are making ourselves more vulnerable, and then there is conflict. So habitat loss is a major issue, because let's just read this part. Can someone just read this part for me, from here, what I have marked in blue? What about you, Parker? Would you like to read this portion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Once covering more than 14% of
So
the
sorry,
Earth's
sorry, sorry. It's about so read from here. It's about rainforest. Yeah, go ahead.
most dramatic examples of habitat loss came from tropical rainforests.
Mhm.
Covering more than 14% of the Earth's land surface, these rainforests now cover no more than 6%. They are being destroyed fast, but by the time you finish reading this chapter, 1,000 more hectares of rainforest would have been lost. The Amazon rainforest, it is so huge that it is called the lungs of the planet. Harboring probably millions of species, is being cut and cleared for cultivating soya beans or for conservation to
Converge,
grasslands,
no conservation, conversion.
conversion to grasslands for raising beef cattle. Besides total loss, the degradation of many habitats by pollution also threatens the survival of many species.
Yeah. So imagine it's just about one type of forest, tropical rainforests. They once used to cover 14% of the Earth's total land surface, and now they're less than 6%. Now it's huge, it's more than 50%. So we have already destroyed or removed around 55% of these forests, and we don't know. It's not like, when I say we don't know, collectively the human species is ignorant about it. So someone somewhere in Brazil is cutting forest. How should I care about it sitting in India or in my country? It's not my forest. No. So this is the thing that needs to be changed, and that's why across the globe everyone has to read and understand why biodiversity loss is crucial. Okay. And why are we doing that? Because we need more things for our use, like soya bean to make oils and other sort of things. And we need animal products like meat, the beef meat. And to raise cattle, we need grassland because we can't raise cattle in forests. So we don't care about other species that are dying. So habitat loss is one major thing. And the second thing is, even if we are not cutting, so in India, let's say someone says, oh, I'm not cutting the forest is just beside the city, but we are not touching it. But we are polluting the city to an extent where that pollution is not localized. It will seep into the forest as well, whether it is the air pollution or water pollution. You know? So it will seep, and when it will seep, it will affect so the organisms or the plantation in the forest as well. So that also leads to habitat loss because plants die, animal die. And if not total loss, then we also have to understand that fragmentation is also bad. What do I mean by fragmentation? That, okay, this is a huge forest. We are not going to cut it. Just allow us to build a 6-lane highway through it. So you are just fragmenting the forest. You're not completely cutting it, but because there were two cities on two edge of the same big forest, instead of going, taking a perimeter round and moving the other city, we just want to make a road from the heart of the forest. How does it matter? It does matter. And evidences suggest that when you fragment two zones of a forest, the two zones starts developing very, very differently sometimes, because animals will be hesitant and often, will not be successfully moving around. So their movement gets restricted. So their eating habits, their hunting habits, their foraging habits get restricted. Um, and it has been seen in case of even bigger animals like elephants. So elephants, they're great migrators. They move from one place to another, and they in groups. So in groups, they constantly keep moving because of three reasons. One is they have a different breeding ground and a different foraging ground. And their foraging ground, they don't stay at one place and keep eating because they eat a lot. In a day, an elephant can eat around even 100 kgs of plantation. So they keep moving and keep eating because that's how the jungle can stay. So suppose they are eating here, then they will move to another area of the forest, they will eat there, then they will move. So they need free access to move everywhere so that they do not exhaust primary production at one place. And that's how their behavior allows ecosystem to stay balanced. But when we make huge highways, or when we fragment their habitats, that movement gets restricted. So they are pushed or forced to have closer breeding grounds and foraging grounds, and that again lead to decline in primary production. Then even if elephants will survive for some time, other species won't. They will come in direct conflict, and after some time, even elephants won't, and that will be a total disaster. Do you understand what's happening here, Parker, Iram, Aisha? Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So these are very important because migratory habits should not be affected. They have been evolved in millions of years, and we humans shouldn't push them to change those habits because that leads to their population declines. Okay. So this is first, habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. Second is over exploitation. Uh, Many species have been extinct simply because of humans' greed, and because we always need more and more and more from the nature. So if you think that this is a land which is good in a particular ore, or if I mine here, I will get lots and lots of this chemical, then we will not just mine that space, but we would like to also mine a lot of other spaces, without thinking that we have to stop at one point. We Of course we need to get resources. We need to get chemicals like lithium to make our batteries. We need to get ores of iron to make our metals, cars, buses. We need to get aluminium to make our aeroplanes. But we also need to understand that when we got enough, how should we, learn to ration it? But instead, we need more and more and more and more. In that um, pursuit, we often end up destroying a lot of habitat. So if you read this, so many species extinction in the last 5 centuries were due to over exploitation by humans. For example, passenger pigeon. We all know about passenger pigeon. This is the you know about what is a passenger pigeon? People,
Yes.
no? Pigeon. What is the difference between pigeon and passenger pigeon? So passenger pigeon was it's just, I think it was only endemic to the Northern America, the North America, and it's called passenger because it passes by because it has a migratory habit. So this is a migratory pigeon. It's not like a pigeon who, like the normal pigeon that we see around, and they can be born and they can stay forever in that same, even in that same building sometimes, you know, and they will live. But passenger pigeons need a lot of space and they are now extinct. Okay. And if you ask why they are extinct, because they were hunted on a massive scale and deforestation. So for migration, the pigeon will not passenger. So unlike the normal, the gray pigeons that we see everywhere, we think that we also feed them in at most places, thinking that we are doing something very good as humans. How good a human I am. I'm going and feeding pigeons. We are not doing any good to the ecosystem. When someone feeds pigeon, I tell them, when you overfeed pigeon, their population increases. And you know that pigeon and many other birds share the same niche. So Parker is asking, don't all pigeons migrate? No, not all pigeons migrate. Um, some pigeons are just are local, like they are born and then they live there, they lay eggs, they fly, but that's not migration. They fly from one place to another to find food, shelter, things like that, make the nest. But passenger pigeons were migratory. And for them, and their migratory habits were different in a way where they migrate from forest to forest to forest. While migrating, they cannot have a stop in cities like normally. And when we started, when Americans started doing deforestation at a large scale to make all these big cities, environment for them, it was um, migratory behaviors were affected, and they were also hunted because they were very beautiful looking pigeons. They were hunted on mass scales. I don't know for what, maybe for keeping them because they were beautiful or even for eating. I don't know. So that caused their extinction. Presently, at the present, we also see that our activities in oceans or near oceans uh, is making a lot of marine life becoming extinct. So we are over exploiting fisheries. So everyone needs fish to eat, and different parts of the world have different demands for different fish. Most of these fish come from seawater, like marine water, not just fresh water. So, and it is so if something comes from fresh water, you can also have a lake or a pond or even an artificial lake or artificial pond, and you can harvest them for eating purposes. But since most of these come from marine, the only thing is to fish, like put the net in and fish out these different species of fishes. But we are over exploiting. We just want to, uh, uh, shelve these fish because they have a good shelf life. So every um, general store, grocery store, supermarket should be full with tuna cans, much more than what the population needs. And that is causing a whole catastrophic decline in the ecosystem, marine ecosystem. So the rate at which we are killing or harvesting is far more than the rate at which they can be replenished back. So that's again leading to a lot of extinction. Okay, so and even not just extinction for the species that don't matter to us and matter to ecosystem, but also the species that matter to us commercially, like tuna itself or hilsa, sardines, all these, they are also getting affected. So if we don't have them, you cannot make an artificial ocean and raise these fish. So that's the problem. So commercially also, many companies or economies are going to face problems. So that's overexploitation. And third is alien species or foreign species invasion. And now, how do these invasions happen? Sometimes it happens because of human interventions, not sometimes, most of the times. So we import and export things from one place to another. And when people didn't know or didn't understand properly that what are the consequences of taking one species from its native environment and putting it into somewhere else just for the beauty value of it, they did it a lot. Okay, so there are some examples given here where alien species which were introduced by human to different ecosystems and what they caused. Yes, Parker, would you like to read this paragraph? Let's the alien species invasion.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
When alien species are introduced unintentionally or deliberately for, for whatever purpose, some of them turn invasive and
Mhm.
cause decline or extinction of indigenous species. The Nile
Yeah.
perch introduced
Indigenous is what used to live there already, the natives. Okay. Yeah.
The Nile perch introduced into Lake Victoria in East Africa led eventually to the extinction of an ecologically unique assemblage of more than 200 species of cichlid fish
Yeah.
in the lake.
Yeah. Chichlid. It's a variety of fish, lake fish. It's a freshwater chichlid or
Cichlid
kick.
fish in
Yeah.
the lake. You must be familiar with
Some
the
people call
environment.
it kicklid. Yeah. Yeah. So this
You
this
must
is first example. This is first example. Let me just explain you this. So Nile perch is a fish, and it's found in it's native to eastern part of the Africa, and uh, it's called Nile perch because it comes from Nile River. So they took Nile perch from Nile and introduced it into Lake Victoria. Okay, and when they did that, they saw that more than 200 species of these cichlid fish that lived in the lake. It's a huge, big lake. They started getting affected, and almost all of them almost got extinct because Nile perch just overpowered them, or killed them. And or in the presence of Nile perch, they were not able to get the food or hunt because Nile perch is fairly big. They are huge fish. So I think a Nile perch can grow up to 6-7 foot long. So from tip to toe, a Nile perch can be as long as a fully grown human. And these cichlid fishes are small fish in general. So that led to a whole extinction event that happened. And people didn't know it. They thought that, okay, let's just preserve one. So they wanted to increase the number and conserve Nile perch, but instead they lost a lot of, we lost a lot of cichlid species. Yes, go ahead.
You must be familiar with the environment damage caused and threat posed to our native species by invasive weed species like carrot grass,
Mhm.
parthenium, lantana, and water hyacinth.
Yeah. So
The,
So carrot grass we already talked about, right? It's a invasive species that came along with wheat that was imported. And now Parthenium, which is called carrot grass, has invaded almost every ecosystem in the middle and northern India. Okay, water hyacinth, which is also known as a Bengal terror, Brits brought it from the European temperate climate, and because they used to look good, the water lilies, and thought that okay, we'll also have it in near the viceroy buildings and bungalows in the lake around, and then they just invaded the whole space and killed a lot of freshwater life, both plant and animal, because uh, they will just invade and take over, and all the sunlight and nutrients they will take for themselves. Lantana is another invasive species that it has caused problem in many natural ecosystems of India. And they are very bushy. They grow in thick bushes, and they do not allow other native plants to grow. They don't allow them space. And plus, when they grow a lot, herbivorous organisms uh, can't eat them. So for them, you will see that there's a lot of greenery, but the kind of plantation that there should be so that herbivores can sustain is not present. So it takes space for itself, but it affects the whole ecosystem in return. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Aisha. Read the last line.
The recent illegal introduction of the African catfish Clarias gariepinus for aquaculture
Mhm.
purposes is posing a threat to the
Indigenous
indigenous
catfishes. Yes.
catfishes and rivers.
Yes, exactly. So, this is a recent example where African catfishes were brought to Indian rivers, and they just do not allow the indigenous catfish to flourish. Now, the problem is, why there are examples and examples of such events where mistakes were made. One is sometimes they were unintentional. We didn't know, like in the case of this Nile purge. But since now we know that this can happen, we need people to sit, talk to people who know colleges, and try to understand it may what may be the cost of doing something or not doing something. By doing something, are we not putting the current ecosystem to threat? That's why now there are many rules and regulations on import and export of organisms from one ecosystem to another. You cannot take certain plants and animals from one country and cannot grow it in other countries. That's called international trade. So there are very strict rules that now are in place to prevent all these ecosystems colliding with each other and alien species invading other places and killing that ecosystem. So this awareness is now growing up, and it's important for us also to understand. The similar kind of talks happened, and there was a whole group of scientists who sat and discussed every time whenever there is any reintroduction programs. Like you must have heard recently, cheetahs from Namibia have been introduced into Indian forest, right? Reintroduced, because cheetahs at one point of time used to be in the Indian ecosystem, but then they got extinct, and then people thought about it and thought that okay, if we bring Namibian cheetahs, maybe they will again be a part of Indian ecosystem and they will adapt and live accordingly. So this program recently kicked off. We still don't know what's going to be the future. So let's see how it goes. There are skepticisms for this because people think that since cheetahs were not there for 60, 70 years, they got extinct long back. And why they got extinct? Overhunting. Again, kings, princely people, these big names, Brits and Indians, both used to hunt them for sport. So we hunted it all. Almost tigers were also on the verge of extinction, and then this Save Our Tigers program started. Save our lions, save our tigers, save our rhinos, and whatnot. So they are saving everything they were killing at one point of time. So every time saving, reintroducing doesn't work. So saving is the best thing. But in case of cheetahs, we have reintroduced, and time will tell if that 70 years or 60 years of gap was enough. Because the thing is, if something is missing, something like a predator is missing from ecosystem, other, you know, organisms will take its place. Correct? You understand? And there might be consequences of reintroducing that organism back. That organism might or might not. So it's not exactly the same environment in which you are reintroducing these cheetahs. The ecosystem has changed for them, and they are a change for the ecosystem as well. So if it works, then they might fit in. If it doesn't, then something will not work out. So we'll get to know. But this is how alien species invasion can affect. Then we have co-extinctions. Co-extinction is just a result of many human activities that lead to, sometimes we think, and I come back to the same question that we started with in the beginning, that what if just one species is lost? What if all the mosquitoes go extinct? You know, what are we afraid of? So mosquitoes going extinct is not a problem for humans. In fact, we will be more happier. Of course, some companies will lose their business, like mosquito repellent creams and all these mosquito killing chemicals. They will think of something else. Probably they will start killing more cockroaches. But what's the problem? The problem is that we don't know for sure what all other species depend on mosquitoes being around. So the chances of events like co-extinctions are also a problem. Sometimes we think that only one species will go out, but instead, a lot of other species also are at the risk now, because plants and animal species alike, they live on, in independence with other species. And it is seen especially in cases of where the plant animal interactions or these population interactions are very, very tightly knit, like a prey predator, like a parasite, mutualisms. So in all these, if you kill one species or if we lose one species, the other will also be lost. Okay, that's one major problem with people now taking bees very seriously. Bees are a great pollinators, right? And not all bees. Some type of bees only are pollinating the crops that we depend on for food. So if we lose bee, we are not just losing a bee, we are losing a major pollinator for our crops, and our crops yield will be drastically low. In times where we need to increase crop yield, imagine that the world faces a crop decline, yield decline for continuous 4 or 5 years. There will be chaos everywhere. The prices will start going high because there is more demand and less supply, and then there'll be wars that could be fought on resources. And of course, wars are always fought on resources, so humans will start killing each other for resources. Currently, that resource that people say, you must have heard of this, no, that if ever there is going to be a third world war, that will happen over resources like water, right? Because we are polluting a lot of our fresh water sources, or fresh water sources are getting more and more limited, and people don't have fresh water everywhere to drink. Yeah. Okay. So co-extinctions, all these four factors are clear to you that causes biodiversity loss. These are the four major driving factors. Okay. Clear, everyone? Okay. Now again, write this question. This question comes as it is. Why should we conserve biodiversity? So what causes we understood. Why should we conserve biodiversity is again the same arguments that we talked about, but they are broadly divided into three categories. Okay, we mostly have talked about the ethical category. So first is narrow utilitarian category. Narrow or narrowly utilitarian arguments are that, we have a lot of dependency on biodiversity for our economic gains. For example, fruits, cereals, pulses, fiber, rubber, lubricant, resin, dyes, flowers for making perfumes and other things, and plants for medicinal purposes. All these give us um, good economic importance. Okay, but what if someone says, okay, now we are capable of making chemicals synthetically in labs, so we don't have to depend on forests for these medicinal plants. I can also make perfumes, I can also make synthetic resins. Like we don't So nowadays we don't rely on animal leather. We can have this synthetic leather that's made from chemical. Same goes for rubbers, dyes, lubricants, and every of these. For construction, we are no longer using, let's say, just the wood. We can have artificial materials that we can use in construction. Okay, firewood is no longer required. We can just burn mm, you know fuel, or we can generate heat through electricity. So let's say all these things we can still replace. So narrow utilitarian argument is only about economy. So we should conserve biodiversity because biodiversity gives us economic benefits. Make sense, Aisha, Parker? So all that comes under narrow utilitarian argument. But there are something called broad utilitarian arguments. Now, broadly utilitarian argument says that we need to protect biodiversity because some things that we get from nature is not replaceable. For example, the oxygen that we breathe. So if we do not have Amazon, like if one day at the rate at which we are cutting down Amazon, if there is no Amazon, it's then the planet has no lungs. We call it them the lungs of planet for a reason. They are so huge, you can even see Amazon from space. In fact, you see Amazon from space when you look at the South America from space. All you are seeing is that green thing, which is Amazon. So if Amazon is lost, we are losing the primary producers that make oxygen for us. You cannot make that much oxygen in labs and give to everyone. It's something we are getting for free, but our life depends on it. Okay. Second thing that we will lose is pollination service. Who are you going to tell to go and pollinate your fields if you lose biodiversity? So these are broad utilitarian arguments that mostly are used by scientists to convince, world leaders that, see, we need to conserve certain things and they are very important. Okay. So because we cannot put any economic tag or price tag on it, they are much more valuable than that. So you understood what is narrowly utilitarian and broadly utilitarian arguments?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the third is then ethical argument. We being humans, we should have ethics. That is what makes us human, and humanity and all these terms make sense. What is the difference between us and animals who are just mere living for their own survival if we do not have ethics? So ethical argument is like I said, that this is not just our home. This is every other species' home. So we have a moral duty being one of the intelligent species on the planet, and we are not the only intelligent species, but we are the only species that is a multitasker. So why humans are so successful? When someone asks me in class, or how much, from my limited perspective, I realize that humans are not the best in anything. If we talk about, okay, forget about doing maths and making rockets for now. So if we just remove the brain and let's think for a moment like this, are we the most resilient species? No. We are very, very vulnerable to infections and everything. Are we the strongest? No. We can't even fight a wild boar. Forget about fighting chimpanzees and tigers. Are we the fastest? No. Are we the we can we climb the best? No. Can we swim the best? No. So, but what we can do the best is our anatomy and physiology has allowed us to do all these things um, by making tools. So, if I cannot make a hole in a tree like a woodpecker is a specialist of drilling in a tree. I will make a tool that drills that does the same thing. Correct? If I can't fly like GF falcons, I'll just make a paraglider and do the same. If I can't swim, I will just learn to swim as much as I can. Do you understand? We have we have hands that help us to hold, do fine work, and also do coarse work. This is what makes us very, very unique as a species. And that's what has, along with our thinking capabilities, it is also not entirely true that we are the most intelligent species. Intelligence, we are capable of writing and talking and passing on the education, culture, history, art, science with others. The other species are also very, very intelligent. Every species is very intelligent. One of the most intelligent species on the planet is octopuses. Octopus are so intelligent, they learn. They are used in research for their learning and memory. We try to understand learning and memory through octopus. But since octopus does not have their language in which they write, produce book, and share it with other octopuses, they are not ruling the planet. But they are successful in their own ecosystem. So saying that humans are the most intelligent is not entirely true. Sure, our brain is the most advanced in certain manners because our brain has centers that other organisms do not have. That's true, but we are also multitasking. That's what makes us. So in a way, if I summarize, we are jack of many traits, but we are master of none, except for being cognitively in our with respect to our cognition, we are better. Okay. So the ethical argument then says that if we are better, if we are the species that can make a difference, we should also be able to make that difference in a good direction, right? So three arguments: narrowly utilitarian, broadly utilitarian, and ethical arguments. Remember to write these points. This question comes because you will get better marks. Okay, now having said that we should do that, the next question is how do we do that? How do we conserve biodiversity? What are the ways? So in general, there are two ways. Either you can conserve biodiversity where it is. That's called in situ conservation. In situ and ex situ. In situ means on site. Conserve biodiversity where it is. If you want to conserve Himalayan biodiversity, conserve the Himalayan region, right? Another way to do it is if you want to conserve a particular kind of a animal that lives in Himalaya and now they are getting extinct. So you take some of these organisms from their wild and you conserve them somewhere in a artificial setup, like somewhere like which has the similar kind of environment, but not in the wild. So that's called ex situ, off-site conservation. Both are very important. Sometimes in situ conservation is not entirely possible. So we also do ex situ conservation. So in situ, examples are protecting hotspots. So for example, if you want to protect a lot of species at the same time, protect the hotspots. For example, Eastern Ghats, Western Ghats, you know, um, island nations like Japan, Sri Lanka. These are very, very important hotspots. So if we just protect these areas, we will protect a lot of species because they have high species richness. That's why they are called hotspots of biodiversity. Okay. And ex situ approach, and how do we do in situ things? By making these things. So remember these names. First is biosphere reserves. So you must have heard of the term like tiger reserves. In Assam, we have a rhino reserve. We have lion reserves, right? So reserves are areas which are natural. Uh, we don't touch it, like we don't make changes in it. Animals are free to live in their natural habitat. We just do not allow anyone to come and affect that natural habitat. So no hunting is allowed. You cannot go and get trees or things from there. So you just preserve nature as it is. Those are biosphere reserves. Then we have national parks and sanctuaries. These are slightly different from biosphere reserves because here there is some level of dependency that these animals have on humans for their welfare. So we take care of certain things, so which means we are stakeholders in maintaining the population. But it's still more natural than a zoo. So zoo is not a type of a in situ conservation. It is a ex situ conservation. So when I make a zoo and I'm breeding certain animals in a zoo, that is one way of conserving some species. Yes, Parker, you have a question?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So often if you go to IUCN website, or if you go to just type any animal's name on Google and go to the Wikipedia, they will tell you the IUCN status. Often you will see that for some animals it's written that they are endangered in the wild or they are extinct in the wild. So what does this mean? This means that these organisms are still on the planet, but they are not found in good numbers in the wild. Wild means in forest, reserves, national parks, or sanctuaries. But they are present in protected environments like zoos or special areas where they are breeding grounds have been made. Okay. So that's what it means, extinct in the wild, but still some are present somewhere. So for in situ conservations, what's important is biosphere reserves, national parks, sanctuaries. Okay. And sacred groves are nothing but these are tracts of forests which are which are given total protection, 100% protection by communities that live around. So in many cultures, certain things are uh, taken as or regarded as sacred. Like many cultures think that this forest is the sacred forest of their ancient gods. So no one should go in and no one should try to defile or cut tree or kill animals in this region. So these kind of approaches which are related to cultural, which have cultural significance, also help in protecting biosphere. And this is also a method of in situ conservation. Okay, and these are examples given of such sacred groves where people in Meghalaya, Rajasthan, Western Ghat, Eastern Ghat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, many communities are very you know emotional and culturally very close to certain forests and certain areas, wildlife areas. Okay. So here the government and the communities work hand in hand to conserve a lot of wildlife. And like I said, ex situ conservation is in this approach has to be taken in cases where we know that the they living in wild will not work. So we have to take certain, it's like the case is so bad now that there are only 5, 10, or 15 individuals left for a species. And if we just allow them to live in the jungle and they can die. So we take them out of their natural habitat and put them in special settings where we protect, humans protect. The food is given by human. They are given proper care and treatment so that they don't get any infection. It is decided by humans that when they will breed, with whom they will breed, and when their new progenies will come, they will be taken care by humans again. So that is called a ex situ conservation. So all the zoo for animals and botanical gardens and parks for plants are example of ex situ conservation. Make sense? Or like safari parks where you have kept one kind of animal and humans will be allowed to go and see these animals. So wildlife safari parks are also ex situ conservations. Okay. So here the species live in, the threatened species live in enclosures. They don't live exactly in their natural habitat. They live in enclosures, and that's how we protect. So if you people have heard about Sudan, anyone has heard of the name Sudan?
Sudan, sir.
Sudan, Sudan, not the place, but yeah, not the place. You have heard of the name, the place, right, Parker?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no. So there was this last male member of northern white rhino species. So now the northern white rhino species is considered biologically extinct because there is no male left in that species. There are, I think, two females left, and the last male member was named Sudan. So Sudan had two daughters, and I think or one mate mating pair and one daughter, something like that. So there are two or three handful of females left. There is no male. Sudan was the last male member just before he died, and he was in this ex situ conservation kind of a setup. He was allowed to roam in the wild, but with Sudan, every time there were bodyguards, like proper bodyguards with guns and rifles. Of course, you cannot, just walk with a rhino all the time. So they used to be at a distance, but they were there to prevent any poacher from killing that rhino. Okay. So the one horned white northern rhino. But before he died, scientists preserved his sperm samples. I think there are programs being built and developed that when the female members come of age, or when this technology is ready, they would like to artificially inseminate the females with Sudan sperm and see if they can, to some extent, revive the species. Otherwise, the species is lost. So that was, I think Sudan died a few years ago, a couple of years ago, I think 2021 or something like that. 2020 or 2021, he died. And that was the news that the last male member of the species gone. So that's Sudan's story. Okay. So that's I think that's it. Uh, and this last paragraph is slightly boring, but just read it, that people are doing these kind of meetings like called Earth Summit or COP23. You must have heard of these kind of meetings where leaders meet and talk about how they are going to, conserve or make biodiversity conservation sustainable along with development. Most of the times they are talking, but nowadays, like now, the efforts are also being made in the direction of actual conservations, sustainable development on a global level. So that's a good thing, and let's hope it works, and let's hope we move beyond our personal and political gains and greeds. Yeah. So I think this brings us to the end of this chapter. Here for you to go through this, just go through the chapter at once and ask me if you have any doubts. Okay. So I'll just take a quick water break and come back. So look at the chapter, this and ecosystem both together, and ask me if you have any doubt. Also look at ecosystem, take 3 minutes. And if you don't have any doubts, then in the last half an hour, we will visit two chapters. One is uh, the chapter called human health and disease and reproductive health, where we have to talk about certain things that we left when we were doing genetics and reproduction. Okay. So I'll take a quick break and I'll come back. I stop here. Just go through the chapter and let me know if you have any doubts. Or you can also take a break if you want. Okay, Aisha and Parker.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be back. Okay, hello. Hi, Parker. Back. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes, how are you? Any doubts in this chapter or ecosystem? Like in general, from the ecosystem biodiversity part, is there any doubt? Anything you want to clarify? Any concept? Yes, no? Okay, if there are no doubts, then I would like to go and revisit this. Um, we did human health and disease. We did human health and disease, right? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Uh, we also did reproductive health, right? Yeah. So there's this one chapter.
Reproductive health, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, the only thing I left was some concepts in microbes in human welfare. We did this chapter also, but not in its entirety. So some things that I realized that we kept for the last, if we have time, which is now. We should. So can you open your NCRT, because I just want to point those things in NCRT itself, and they often come in entrances more than they come in boards, because they are fact based things. Not much of concept, but you should just know that you should not miss that part and read that part. So can you open microbes in human welfare in your uh, books? And I will also, let me try to, um, wait, let me share it.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, oh, nothing, sir.
Can you see this chapter? Yeah, go ahead. You had any doubt?
Yes, sir. No, sir, I don't have any doubt.
Okay. So we did this chapter, but we only talked about microbes in sewage treatment in detail, right? Because I asked you to read other things by your own and let me know if you have any doubts, right?
Sir, uh, how long ago did we do this chapter?
We did this after biotechnology. Let me give you exact date. Uh, Microbes in human. It's around 22nd November. We did that. But we talked about mostly sewage treatment, and we left other things for you people to study on your own. And if there are any doubts, so I'm just revisiting this because this is one thing which we have not discussed entirely. So we did it in the second, third week of November. Remember that we talked about sewage treatment only, microbes in human welfare. You were there in that part, or you
Sir,
missed that?
I think I was not there in most of the classes when this chapter was, going on.
Okay. Yeah. No, we did spend a lot of time on this chapter, is what I'm saying. So I think 22nd November was when we did this. Let's see what happened in next class. And yeah. And then we quickly moved to organisms and populations. Yeah. We only talked about microbes in sewage treatment. Anyways, that's why we are doing it now. So okay, perfect. You can see the screen, right? Microbes in human welfare.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this chapter in general is talking about how we are using microbes, microorganisms, uh, all the microorganisms, regardless of whether they are viruses, bacteria, or you see here. So we have bacteria and we have viruses majorly, and how we are using it, or fungi. not just viruses and bacteria, but fungi also for human benefit. So it's divided into 6 smaller subsections. Microbes in household products, which is fairly straightforward and simple. It talks about how we make from curd to other edible products that, so if we go to, let's go one by one. So microbes in household
Yes, sir.
products
I
is,
remember this.
sorry, we didn't,
I remember this, sir.
yeah, you remember, right? We just went briefly on this, and we majorly did the microbe in sewage treatment part, where I described in detail about BOD, primary sludge, secondary treatment, all these things, right? Anaerobic and aerobic. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. But let's just not leave it. So in household products, remember that they have given example of 2 3 things. One is, and most of these are dairy products. One is the curd, bread, and cheese. So these are the 3 things in which we use microbes a lot. So for curd, we make curd from milk, right? And let's just discuss it like a chai and science session, and you know a lot of answers already. So we make curd from milk, and what is curd and how it is different from milk? Curd is more jelly-like, solidified version of milk. Taste
Yes.
changes, right? But how does something very liquidy like milk convert into curd? Do you know the? Do you know what happens? We know that there is a bacteria involved called lactobacillus, right? Um, but lactobacillus is not the only bacteria. It is one of the bacteria that's present in curd. But most of the bacteria which are present in curd, they have to be using lactic acid for their metabolism somewhere, because that's why they are called LAB together, lactic acid
Yes.
bacteria. Yeah. So many of these species of lactic acid bacteria, they grow in the milk and convert it into curd. How does that happen? Because when these bacteria are growing, they produce acids, right? Mostly acids are, we know that if there is an acid, the pH of that thing decreases. And in acidic environment, proteins coagulate. We also know that. So the more these bacteria will grow, the more acidic the environment of that milk will be. And in that acidic environment, the proteins which are present in milk, like casein is one of the milk protein, right? So that protein coagulates. And when it coagulates means it accumulates together, form clusters. And that cluster formation of proteins in the milk makes the milk into curd. And if a milk has more water, which means if someone has, what do you say? Um, you know, People do that, no? Add water to milk to increase its volume. It's like a cheating. But if someone gives you milk that has more water, which is not naturally milk water, which has been added from outside, in that case, if you make curd from that kind of milk, you will see that a lot of water is lost. Like you will see a lot of water coming out when it's curdling on top. So there should be some water, of course, coming out when milk become curds. But if it's too much, you can say that, oh, this milk was, you know, someone added a lot of water in this milk. Or you can do it yourself at home and try. Take permission from your mothers before you do that. Okay. So that is one thing that happens. That's how it become curds. And why curd is better sometimes in diet, and why we should include curd. This is also a question, a one marker question. Uh, Give one reason why curd has more nutritional value than milk. It's because many of these bacteria also produce something that we do not get through any other diet, or we cannot produce in our body. That's called vitamin B12 complex. So there is no or very limited natural source of vitamin B12 in our diet. and we cannot synthesize it in our body. Yes, you have a question, Parker?
No, sir.
Yeah. So we get it mostly through the good bacteria, and there are many good bacteria in the curd. So that's why we should have curd in our diet. Okay. And another good reason why we should have curd is because when we are putting good bacteria in our system, they will compete with bad bacteria, right? And if we ourselves increase the number of good bacteria, then our bad bacteria will not survive the competition. So they kind of overpower and kill the bad bacteria or the disease causing microbes if they flourish. So it's better. You must have seen doctors suggest probiotic, right? Probiotic drinks, these Yakult and all. Have you heard of these probiotic small drinks? People take it for good health,
Yes,
good
sir.
immunity. Yeah. So basically, these are good bacteria. You culture these bacteria, concentrate it, and you take one shot or one sip of it, and it helps. They are bad in taste sometimes because, again, of what they are producing. They are producing acidic content and also vitamin B12, which doesn't taste very good. Okay. So these are prebiotic. Especially they are doctors advise it or prescribe it after someone had a um, um, you know chronic diarrhea or dysentery event or loose motions due to any stomach infection or food poisoning. So when we have loose motions or diarrhea or dysentery like issues, a lot of our gut health, good bacteria, we lose it because of the constant bowel movement, or you understand, right? So when we lose so much of water from our gut, we also lose all these good bacteria. And instead of waiting for these good bacteria to naturally come back again, we can increase this process by asking the person to have more curd in the diet or take these probiotic drinks. Make sense,
Yes,
Parker?
sir.
Yeah. So that's why bacteria is important. Then for bread making, we are dependent on an organism called yeast, which is a fungi. And the interesting thing about yeast is that there are many different types of yeast. Not all yeast can be used for fermentation. Only the budding yeast, which is known as Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It's also called baker's yeast. Now, yeast is a unicellular fungi. Okay. There is also something called fission yeast, that is Saccharomyces uh, pombe. Okay, that's a different species. Yeah. Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So baker's yeast is used for making bread through fermentation, and what it does, it produces CO2. Now that CO2 is a byproduct of fermentation, and CO2 is the reason why breads are fluffy and they have these holes in them, right? Because when it's fermenting, the CO2 need a space to come out, and it comes out through making these small pores. Okay. And fermentation is not just used for making breads. Fermentation is also used for making alcoholic drinks, and which is again a very inherent thing of many cultures across the globe. Okay. And people also use fermentation to they ferment certain kind of food items and increase their shelf life. Okay. And then comes like things like cheese. So cheese has very old roots back in time. So many civilizations had cheese, um, and cheese is one of the oldest food items for which microbes were used. And not just microbes, nowadays we have so much variety of cheese. I think from Swiss cheese to so Swiss cheese is that standard cheese. Whenever you see any image of cheese or any cartoon representation of cheese, they make these triangle with big holes in it, no? Right? Often The only cheese that they show in Tom and Jerry, you know, yellow in color with big holes. Can you
Yeah.
imagine that? That's Swiss cheese. Okay. And those holes are again because of CO2. But this time we are not using a fungi, we are using a bacteria called Propionibacterium shermani. So Sharmani, just like yeast, also um, causes kind of reaction, chemical reaction. It's like fermentation only, but by a bacteria. And they also release large amount of CO2. And this time, the amount of CO2 that is produced is much more than yeast. So that's why breads have these small, small holes, but Swiss cheese has big holes because like a bulk, it when it's forming, the cheese is forming, there is bubbling that happens. So much of CO2 is produced. Okay. And for cheese, people not just use bacteria, they also use fungi. Like they have given you this example, right? Roquefort cheese is ripened by using a fungi to give them particular flavor. There are cheese for which insect larvae are used. And there is one variety of cheese where live larvae of a particular fly is reared in the cheese, and you can see the larvae crawling in that cheese, and it's eaten with the larva alive. So it's like a whole different game of cheese. Okay, I'm good with Swiss cheese, I guess. So cheese, curd, bread. This is household. Will you remember all these examples, Parker?
Yes, sir. Cheese, curd,
And
bread.
yes, and cheese is both bacteria. It can also be fungi, not just bacteria and fungi. We also use insect larvae, which is not in your book, but remember, curd is bacteria and lactic acid bacteria mostly, a whole group of bacteria, and bread is fungi called budding yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Then industrial products we have talked about a bit when we were doing biotechnology. Remember, I talked about big containers. There we used to call it bioreactors. Here we are
Reactor.
calling it fermenters. Again, they are big vessels where we are fermenting things. So to make fermented beverages like wine, whiskey, alcohol, because these are industrial products. Normally people, so in earlier times, people used to make wine at their home in barrels, right? In agriculture. So wineries, but now it's commercial. So they are done in big containers. So in industrial products, we talk about fermented beverages, basically alcohol, and not just for drinking but also for other purposes, like we need methanol also for making a lot of chemicals for our chemistry reactions, right, for studying chemistry. Then antibiotics we talked about in again we talked about in biotechnology, that just because we know how to grow these bacteria, and so we can grow penicillin, sorry, which is a fungi. We can grow them in large quantities and make them secrete
Sir,
antibiotic. Like yes,
sir, this excess of these bacteria, won't it be harmful?
in what? In
Like, so for example, making a curd.
right. So that's a good question. So all these, like I said, all these bacteria are good bacteria. They are not pathogenic. So lactobacillus is not pathogenic to humans. It does not mean that they are not pathogenic to any organism. You know, lactobacillus, which is not pathogenic to us, is pathogenic to certain flies or certain other organisms. They can cause infection in them, but they do not cause infection in humans. That's why they are not bad for us. And the fact that you cannot protect yourself from bacteria, you have bacteria in your body anyways. If you decide not to eat curd, then your body, your gut will be filled with other kind of bacteria. So what people suggested is, anyways, our gut has bacteria, but what if we deliberately increase lots of good bacteria, because these bacteria will help us produce vitamin B12 for us. All they will do is they will stay in our body They will take food from our nutrients. They will get nutrition from our body. And in return, they will do some biochemical reactions of their own, and they will secrete vitamin B12 that we will absorb and we will be happy. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we are not eating anything or we are not using any bacteria which can cause any pathogenic reaction, infection in our body. Of course, that will be a huge problem. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Right. So for commercial purposes, industrial purposes, two things: alcohol, both for beverage and for scientific studies, and antibiotics for health. These two just keep in mind, and their agents. That's all. And yeah, same thing. Then sewage treatment we have done in detail anyways. So just go through it. And for biogas also, we talked about biogas like methanogenic bacteria. We will harvest and culture a lot of methanogens in a setup like this. It is called a biogas plant, where basically there is a big underground reservoir called digester, where we'll keep all that sludge, cow dung, animal dung. We'll mix dung with water, allow it to digest with methanogens in this digester, and methanogens will produce methane along with CO2 and hydrogen sulfide and other gases, which we will capture and fill at one tank, and that can be used for fuel. That can be used as a fuel. So that's a simple concept of biogas plant. Yeah. BT cotton we have done in biotechnology, how we can use microbes to control pests and diseases. So BT cotton is a very good example. So just read this in detail. And yeah, microbes and as biofertilizers. Yeah. Good. Uh, yes, Parker, you want to say something?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's all about this chapter. Just remember, for every subheading, what you have to keep in mind is the agent, whether it is a bacteria, a fungi, or a virus. And if you can, the scientific name will be great for entrance purposes. For boards, even if you remember the normal name, it's fine. But remembering scientific names is always good. And since it's remembering, so all you can do is just go through this chapter. So how I do it, make a list of agent and cause it the agent that helps. For example, for household activity, curd slash lactobacillus or lactic acid bacteria, cheese slash the names, bread slash the names. Just make a list like that and paste it somewhere in front of your study table where you look it up very often. That's the best way. Okay, Parker?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this brings us to like technically the end of the syllabus. And I'll just tell you the plan for rest of the classes that we will have. They will all now, from now onwards, will be a fast forward revision and concept building classes. So for your board, so we are focused on boards. So now whatever we'll do, we will take direct questions from the previous year's board papers and from NEET previous year's papers, and we will solve those in class. And along with those questions, we will discuss the concepts. So in next class, I will be ready with a set of questions. First, the subjective questions from board's paper, and for the rest, half of the class will be subjective questions from board's paper, and half of the class will be questions from multiple choice questions from NEET paper. Okay, Parker?
Yes, sir. Sir,
And